Amazing. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at the Mindful Dating Book Club. My name is Radha Patel, and I'm the founder and CEO of Single to Shadi. We are a singles platform for South Asians that live and work in the US and Canada. We provide matchmaking services, coaching. We do in-person events such as speed dating and mixers. And we really just offer a community where people can meet other like-minded singles and not feel so alone on that journey from single to shadi. So this month for the Mindful Dating Book Club, we're diving into a really fun book called The I in Indian by author Bhavna Bhatia Rosell. It is a heartfelt debut novel that blends humor, romance, and cultural tension. For those of you who were able to find us, like to join earlier, we did send out a link or a code in order to get a discount on the book. We'll also send it as a follow-up for those of you who are interested after today's conversation to learn more about the book. So stay tuned for that. But if you loved Crazy Rich Asians, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, or Bend It Like Beckham, you're going to find yourself really rooting for the protagonist, Arya Kapoor, in this second generation Indian American navigating that tricky balance between Western ambition and Eastern expectations. So when love shows up in the form of Leo, a steady and grounded and completely outside the plan, Arya is forced to confront identity, tradition, and what it truly means to be seen. This is a great book, you guys, and I'm really excited to dive in. We're so thrilled to be joined by author Bhavna Bhatia Rosell herself, who is a writer and storyteller whose work explores identity, family, and belonging. She is a second generation Indian American, and her stories come from that cultural of in between expectations and authenticity, tradition, and individuality. Bhavna, welcome to the Mindful Dating Book Club.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
We're really excited. I mean, I have a really fun discussion planned for us today. For those of you guys on the call, you're welcome to unmute and share questions at any time. We really want this just to be an open-ended conversation with Bhavna herself. I just want to start by talking a little bit about how we found this book and why we chose it. Shout out to Ankur. I'm not sure if he joined the call or not, but he is a friend of Single to Shadi. And he actually told us that, hey, my cousin is writing this really good book about second generation Indian Americans, deals with love and dating. And obviously it's Single to Shadi. That's all we talk about is dating and relationships. So it was a really good fit for us. But really more so in this discussion, we're going to be diving into like, what is cross-cultural love stories and, how do family dynamics play into that? What about identity and belonging and really that second generation South Asian experience? Even if you are a recent immigrant, I think you're going to find that that same push and pull of East meets West is still happening for you as well. And that tension between tradition, self-love, and personal freedom. So I just want to start with a quick icebreaker. Bhavna, we can start with you and then we'll go around the room. I just want to ask quickly, like the name, where you're joining us from, and maybe a word or two that describes how you feel about your cultural identity.
Okay, I'll start. I'm Bhavna. Nice to meet you guys. I am joining from Leesburg, Virginia. One word that describes how I feel about my cultural identity is clarity, right? And I think that that is something that comes over time with a lot of reflection and digging deep. And I hope to do some of that digging with you guys today.
Awesome. My word will say is cultured. And the reason why is because there's the term ABCD everybody's heard out there. And it's been known as American born confused desi. I flipped it to say American born cultured desi because
Love that.
culturally we have our own relationship to what being Indian is. And so there's no right or wrong. A culture is a culture. So that's my word. LP, I'm coming to you next. You're already unmuted. So what would you say is your word? And please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Lavanya. Hi, Radha. It's been a while. I'm zooming in from the Jersey Shore, and one word to describe me related to my bicultural identity.
Anything that how you feel about your cultural identity, whatever you define
Um,
that as.
Deeply rooted.
Beautiful. I love that. Anjali B, do you want to introduce yourself and give us a word?
Hi, sure. Good evening. Sorry, I just joined. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, I'm excited about this event. I guess in terms of describing one word about culture, I think I'm rooted in my culture, but I also grew up here, so I feel like I have a blend of culture from the States as well as India, um, and across different topics as well. So it's hard to generalize, but yeah, like I think depending on the topic, there are sometimes it's leaning towards one culture versus the other.
So a blend. That's a great word.
Blend.
That.
Yeah. Encore, thanks for joining us. Do you want to introduce yourself and give us your word?
Hi everyone, just joined. I'm Ankur Bhatia. I'm Bhavna's cousin, and I'm here to
Hi.
support her. I missed the first part, so I'm guessing it's a word to describe Indian culture or South Asian culture.
How you feel about your cultural identity?
How I feel about my cultural identity. The words that's like popping up for me is masala right now. Just spicy,
Spicy.
fun, adds a kick to life. That's my cultural identity.
I love it. Excellent. Bhaktawar, you want to go next?
Hi everybody. I'm joining from the Brooklyn area, and I mean, as everybody was talking about their words, I was thinking about mine. I think I'm pretty sorted. Yeah, I think yeah, rooted or sorted. I think that both of them sort of fit into
Great. So you're
into
comfortable. You
my
got it. You
experience.
know where you stand.
Yes, yes. It's taken a bit to get here, but yeah, I'm there.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Bhavin, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Bhavin from Jersey City. Thanks for arranging this session. I've been into mindfulness lately, and I think culture is basically our roots as well as some kind of flexibility because I think times are changing very fast and you have to also be in tune with times. So it's somewhere in between, right? Sort of like it's like 10 years ago, if someone would have asked me to invest in Bitcoin, I would have never thought about it. I would have straight away shot it down. But now it is it's very dynamic and everything is very fast moving. So yeah, that's how I look at it.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Kinjal, do you want to go next?
Yes. Hi, my name is Kinjal. I'm from New Jersey. I was born in India and I moved here at the age of 12, which I wanted to stress on this fact because I feel like I've held on to my culture a lot, and especially my childhood. And I meet people who come from India 10 years ago, and they're completely different. And I feel like I'm more rooted in the Indian culture, maybe because I grew up in Jersey, but Jersey is like a second India. But I did live elsewhere, and I lived in other countries too in between. But I think that's been interesting fact of my life, that sometimes it's even people from India are like their identity is different from people who grew up in the United States. So the confusion is actually, I think everybody's confused. I don't think it's American born or Indian born, or I think it's just what people's preferences are and what they've adapted and what they've hung on to. For me, it's been what I grew up with, right? Like that's in the Indian culture and everything, and I've held on to that. But for some people, it might be whatever the new generation, like everything's changing. So yeah,
It's a
that's
spectrum, kind of like Bhavin said, dynamic
yes.
of it. Ramina,
I'm from BC in Canada, and I was born and raised here. And I guess when it comes to culture, I was thinking like connection and like community, because again, like it's something that people kind of relate to one another on, right? And so like you instantly can feel like connected to somebody if you share that culture and everything that comes with it feels familiar, feels comfortable. Yeah, so I would say connection.
awesome. All the way from BC. Thanks so much for joining us. And culture and community, those are great words. Shrija,
I'm
she might have.
unable to talk. I am driving. Sorry about it.
That's fine. Thank you so much for joining. All right. And then last but not least, our director of events, Utkarsh.
Hey Radha, hey Bub. No, I can't wait for this. So I would like to go with the word chameleon. It's actually an animal. I like being able to oscillate between different cultures. I love my Desi culture, but I also enjoy partaking in other cultures as well. I find that to be like rich and flavorful. I find that to be like a rich flavor of life. So, I go with chameleon. I like my Desi self for sure, but I like being able to also partake in other stuff as well.
I like
Chameleon.
that.
Cool.
Guess we
Well,
all have to do that in different situations, right?
yeah, and I think there's another word for it, code switching, right? Where you act like
Yeah.
one person in one group of people and a different one in a different yeah, very much chameleon. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining. We're going to jump in some questions and feel free to add your questions to the chat as well, or you can come on off of mute on camera, whatever you want, and ask Bhavna directly. But I want to dive into obviously some of the key themes that came up in the book. You being second generation Indian American yourself, you're writing about that cross-cultural rom-com in a way, but it also got deep into identity and expectation. So what inspired you to write Arya's story? Was there a moment or spark that made Arya become real for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always wanted to write this book, probably from the first time I was ever called an ABCD. Then, throughout college, as moving through my 20s, I questioned a lot of the things that I learned growing up. It challenged it. And I felt like I couldn't quite figure out where to fit in, right? I felt not quite Indian enough for the kids that had come from India later, but not quite, a little too Indian for the American kids, right? Because whether you're second generation or even if you're growing up here, what's happening in your household is still, Desi food, Desi music, Desi movies. You have your nuclear family, you have your extended family. That's still what you're surrounded by. But you didn't grow up in India, so you're also growing up with these American values, and your reality is very different than what it would have been if you were in India. So I knew that I always wanted to write this story, but the characters really came to life for me probably when I had my son. So 2 years ago, when I had him, I started to think about, what it means, what a huge responsibility it is to be a parent. I started to think about my upbringing, my husband's upbringing, and reflecting on what do I want to pass along, right? Which means tackling a lot of the things that we've been conditioned to think and believe. How do we define family? How do we define love? How do we define respect? What kind of relationship do we want to have with our kid compared to the relationship we had with our parents? So I started to think about all that, and that was when I really found my voice. And my son is half Indian and half Italian. So that made me think, would kids see my son as less Indian because he's mixed? It doesn't make him less Indian, right? He's, and then I thought, what does being Indian even mean? It's a race, right? It's a place of origin. It's not a behavior. And that was when it really clicked for me that I need to capture this. So that was what inspired me, is that I wanted people to understand that being Indian is something you are, right? It's not something that you do. It's not something you achieve by accomplishing a mold that we've been taught, right? It doesn't take away from you being Indian or more or less Indian if you do something different. And I want my son to know that he is just as much Indian as somebody who came to India or came to America later, somebody that was born and raised in India. That Indian is like a spectrum, like we talked about. It can mean so many different things.
Yeah, and if we think about just the history of the Indian people, we've been all over the world for multiple generations, right? West Indian, Australia, Sri Lanka, like we've been everywhere. So that concept of just being able to tie your roots back is what makes us Indian, and that's awesome. So speaking of your son and being Italian, half Italian, how much of Arya or this story plays into your own personal life experiences?
Sure. Much of this is based on my life. It's not by any means like an autobiography or a memoir, anything like that. I am a marketing director, and my husband is Italian and he is a teacher. But a lot of the, struggles from the book were not based on my life. Rather, they were based on experiences of my cousins, my friends, extended family members, people who knew people, stories that I heard, all of the stories that used to confuse me. I used to hear about women being shamed for this and for that, and none of it ever made sense to me. And maybe people would tell me that that's me not getting my Indian side, but that was just me not understanding why certain things were the way that they were. I was very fortunate. My parents are very well assimilated. They understood that coming to America meant letting go of many things, embracing new things. They knew it was going to be different. So they came here open-minded and willing. In fact, my mom has 3 daughters, and I know that one of the reasons she wanted to come here was because of her own experience as a woman in that culture, the things that the independence is the autonomy she couldn't have, right? And that's not all families. Even India has evolved so much in regards to that. But she wanted a different life for her daughters. So she came here with that in mind, which obviously changed my story, right? Compared to a friend or a cousin. And I had to watch that growing up, and it absolutely impacted the way that I wrote these characters and the experiences that these characters go through.
Yeah. Audience, I'd love for you to chime in on this next question as well. But Bhavna, we know Arya straddles both worlds and the tension that's with there. What do you think, or what are some of the anecdotes that you put in the book purposefully that illustrate that tension? And maybe were they from your friends and family's experiences or things that you had heard along the way?
Sure. So I think every second generation, even first generation, second generation, third generation, right? We all have our own unique experiences, and we're all trying to walk a line between both identities. We're trying to figure out what parts of the things, from our old culture or heritage do we want to keep? What part of the new culture do we want to embrace? And they end up creating this mixed culture. For example, one of the things that the book addresses is the stigma around divorce, right? Divorce in the Indian culture, many cultures, not just South Asian cultures, many cultures, is very heavily frowned upon. And I would say in South Asian culture, maybe more than other cultures, right? And there's characters in the book that go through the divorce, sometimes by their own doing, sometimes not in their control. And this is an example of the tension that exists in traditional thinking and modern day reality of divorce rates and how frequently they happen. Right there, the divorce rate is over 50%. This is our reality, right? Yet it's still something we are taboo to talk about.
Yeah. Even people who live in this country tell me all the time their biggest fear is that they're going to end up divorced. And it's like 2025, we've seen it all around in media and family everywhere now, especially in this country.
Yeah.
Why is that the biggest fear when it comes to being in love?
I don't know, because you got a 50-50 shot.
Yeah.
And the truth is if you talk to anybody that's been through terrible heartbreak, that's been through tragedy, there's no controlling that,
Oh.
right? But I think the tension then becomes, is it better to stay in a bad marriage, right? Is the tension is it better to stay in a bad marriage because I'm ashamed or afraid of divorce, or is it better to get out? And that's a really tough conversation for generations to have, right?
Yeah.
There's like a total disconnect there. And again, I'm not here endorsing divorce. Like I'm happily married. Like I just hope that we can get to a point where we can accept it and talk about it in a way that, you know, sometimes it makes sense, right? Or maybe sometimes it's necessary, or maybe sometimes it really is better for both people. And we should be a little bit more forgiving of that.
Empowering, right? You don't have to be stuck like you mentioned, right? It's really, you get to make the choice if, and people evolve, things change, love fades. So if you have that ability to make that choice, so many of us have parents that grew up in, or that came from arranged marriages. They don't all have perfect marriages, and they were not all good examples of what a healthy marriage should look like. So you mentioned your mom having 3 daughters. She wanted you all to have that freedom and flexibility to choose for yourself. And if you make a mistake, it wasn't the end of your world.
Right. And to define love in a way that makes sense to us, right? For example, I think a lot of what we have learned, what a lot of what I saw growing up was that love was obedience, right? It was being obedient to your family. It was not upsetting your parents. It was following the rules. It was doing what was expected of you. And therein comes a disconnect between the child and the parent about having a good relationship because they don't really know each other, right? A lot of the second generation Indian kids I grew up with, they hid a lot of things from their parents, right? I mean, they hid where they were going, who they were hanging out with, what they were doing. Yeah, and I mean, I did it too. I did it too. And you know, I think that's a huge tension, right? Like we have this loving relationship with our parents based on obedience, and we call that love and respect, but there isn't actual mutual understanding or communication or any of the things that I define love to be, right? And my parents gave me the confidence and the courage and the support to define love on my own terms.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I saw a comment come through.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to miss anything.
No, she said, could you comment on divorce is in relation to Indian expectations and Indian mentality? I know you may not relate because your spouse is not Indian, but if you can share your experience of people around you.
Yeah, I'll just go out there and put it out there. I am divorced prior to this marriage. This is my second marriage. My first marriage was to an Indian guy who came to America when he was about 10 or 15. And you know, I also grew up thinking I would marry Indian. You know, that was also expected of me, even though my parents were adjusted. You know, I had grandparents, I had nani nana, dadi dada, I had extended family. You know, like I had a lot of people, and we have this innate thing in us because of how we learned to define love to make our family members happy and to please them, right? It's just in all of us. We want them to be proud of us. We want them to be happy. So I also, you know, thought I would follow along those same footsteps, and I really thought that I would fit into an Indian family. But the mentality is, and this is totally not, I'm not generalizing, you know, I don't want to generalize anything. I think that no matter what the reason is, it's not good, right? I mean, a woman could be abandoned, beat, cheated on, you know, I don't know, she could be treated so poorly. And if she doesn't stick it out, it's like she's shamed, right? Or if her husband decides to leave her, you know, that's somehow her fault too. And again, I'm not generalizing. These are just experiences that I've seen this happen. I'm sure there's a lot of loving families out there, but I think that is the general mentality. Like the girl becomes damaged goods. I mean, hell, she's damaged goods before she even gets divorced, if she's even had a boyfriend before she gets married.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it doesn't take much to be labeled.
A reputation, yeah. And I just like to call out for anybody else, the audience, that we at Single Shadi actually have a specific matchmaking program for second time Shadi. We actually do have a focus on that because nobody is talking about it. None of the mainstream apps are talking about it. None of the matrimonial. It's just such a taboo. It's like, oh, if you're under 30, only then do you deserve to get married and find love. So we do kind of try to address that in what we do. We have a couple of other comments. I'll just go to the comments since we've got great audience participation. So Lavanya is saying, how receptive has your local Indian or South Asian American, I guess,
Community, I meant community been.
okay, sorry, your local Indian or South Asian community been in your intercultural marriage and your biracial son? Her sister is married to a white guy for over 15 years and has two boys who are also biracial.
You know, it really depends. I have a very, like I said, loving, like nuclear family. Like my immediate family is very, very receptive, very open, very loving. But I have extended family members that won't even acknowledge my husband. You know, that's just the reality. And there's nothing you can do about that, right? You have to choose yourself, live for yourself. You can't make everybody happy. And I think that it's very easy to get stuck on that. You know, you just have to find your people, the people that accept you, the people that love you. Ultimately, what's so tricky is we are the ones that have to live with our partner every single day for the rest of our lives, right? Not our parents, not our siblings, not our friends. It's you that has to be with that person every single day. Yet there's a lot of importance given to how other people think or feel your relationship should be, or what's right and what's wrong. Now, of course, family influence is important. I'm not taking away from that. They know you so well, right? In some ways, your parents know you better than you know yourself, right? In other ways, they don't know you at all. So really, you have to weigh their advice and their opinion and take it with a grain of salt and do what's best for you, because you have to be with that person forever.
Yeah. Anjali said, how do you break through some of these stereotypes, specifically if someone grew up in the States versus India? Too many assumptions and expectations versus individually assessing a person for who they are, regardless of their background.
I think that's so fair, Anjali. I think that definitely happens, right? Like if some people have this mental block, if they hear somebody's from India, they make assumptions about what they might believe, their values, what their family might be like, right? Instead of individually assessing. Or if somebody is with somebody from America, they assume like they must be a certain way, or maybe they don't value family, or, you know, like I mentioned that in my book. Like I grew up with the assumption that, you know, Americans were, you know, they had loose morals, they believed in divorce, they didn't respect their parents, you know, they have worse family values than we do. And that made Arya, you know, push Leo away for a while because she had been told these things, which she found to be not true, right? So instead of, you know, it's one, being mindful of your own judgments, starting there, right? In what ways are you stereotyping people? In what ways are you maybe judging somebody? And then figuring out, what are the questions that I can ask to find the answers that I need, right? What are the questions I should be asking instead of assuming? Because really it does come down to communication, right? And getting really clear about what you're trying to figure out.
Yeah. So speaking of Leo, we obviously know that loosely based on your husband as well, but what does Leo represent in the story? Why is it important that he's not fitting in and that struggle that that Arya has with him?
So, for those of you that haven't read the book, half the book is written in Arya's perspective, and the other half of the book is written in Leo's perspective. And I did this intentionally because I wanted to show the stark difference between Leo and Arya's upbringing, conditioning, and how that impacted the way that they enter a romantic relationship. So Leo is so uncomplicated as a character, right? He's simple. He doesn't see that she's Indian. He doesn't see that she's different than him. He doesn't see that she's divorced. He doesn't care, right? And Arya comes into the relationship with so much drama. Okay, she's just so complicated. She's overthinking. She's like, oh, what about the fact that he's Italian? What about the fact that I'm Indian? What about this? What about my parents? What about your parents? What are his parents gonna think? She's so overcomplicated, and it is directly tied to how she was raised, right? And the things that she was taught. And I'm not saying Italian is better than Indian. No, right? I'm saying that these are things that live within all of us South Asians in different degrees. And they are run really, really deep. And I wanted to show how unassuming and uncomplicated love could actually be when you take these things out of the equation.
I want to also touch on the point, like he's a teacher, and so many of us are hung up on that occupation. Where did they go to school? And you know, what do they do for money? And I think she wrestled with that a little bit too. And I think that's something that I see so many of my female clients are so well achieving over, like, you know, it's amazing how great we're doing. But then their expectations that a partner has to either be at that level or higher, just arbitrarily, because the woman shouldn't be the one who's the breadwinner. So I'm glad that you kind of put that element in there as well. I know your husband's also a teacher, but it really, that one struck me.
No, I mean that's a real thing, right? Like and there's other parts of the book where the Arya's father is telling his sister like, "Oh, find a doctor."
Yeah.
Right? Occupation, status, how much money they're making, you know, unfortunately that stuff matters. That I don't agree with it, right? I think especially if you are educated and you are earning your own, you know, I I feel like Aria has been there and she saw that just because somebody has all these checklist items, right, doesn't guarantee he's not going to be a jerk.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing does. Right?
Yeah.
So you can't predict those things. You can't control those things. So she didn't want that to be a factor. And in fact, she highly respects what he does. Right?
Well,
And but she knows in the back of her mind, like this is gonna come up. This is gonna be a thing.
yeah. One of my rules is just go on the date. So I love how you opened it with her sitting in the car, just being like, oh, why am I doing this? I don't want to, never dated a white guy before. For me, it's like, you never know. Like your checklist is never going to actually manifest in real life. So go on the date. And I'm so glad
Yeah.
that you put that in there and she did it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, she tries all these other dating apps and she can't seem to find the right fit and finally just resigns to say, you know, I'm just going to try this, you know, maybe even if it's just for fun, it just reaffirms my beliefs. I don't know. I'm just going to try this and ends up, you know, meeting the love of her life. And that's a message not just about other cultures, but just to staying open and going on the date. You know, there's so much miscommunication via apps, via text. There's so much chemistry that you can't capture when you're not face to face, right? And I got to tell you guys, if I had relied on texting with my husband, we would not have made it.
Yeah.
He is not charming or via text, and he is not good at expressing emotions. I mean, I am so thankful that we talked in person a couple of times and even beyond the first date, because it takes time for people to get truly comfortable to show you who they really are.
Yeah. I was
Unless
listening to,
there's glaring red flags, of course, but you
right.
know.
I was listening to
A lot of women might take a guy's bad texting as a sign that they're not interested, or I need to be able to communicate better with him. You know, but the truth is like I after marriage, you know, my husband and I don't text very much,
yeah,
you
it's very
know, and it's
right. Pick up the
it's
milk.
very interesting the things we use in dating to measure progress and measure success versus an actual, you know, relationship.
I was listening to a podcast this afternoon, and she says that a 30-minute in-person drink or coffee is going to save me 2 to 3 weeks of back and forth texting. I will take that 30-minute meeting every single time. Because
Yeah.
even if he's not the one for you, if everything like you only hits 3 of your 5 check marks, you at least figured it out way quicker than just by
Right.
texting back and forth. Yeah.
Right.
Anjali has a comment here. She says, also, as a younger millennial who grew up here, I seem to be more open to find anyone they get along with, regardless of whether they're Indian or not. So I don't think they feel as tied as some of us may to the cultural criteria or generational mindsets evolving.
I think so, absolutely. You know, I did a call with a younger author. She's 21. I'm almost 40. So she's a third generation here. And so she was born and raised here, and she's an author. She writes rom-coms, and her characters are always very, multicultural as well. And so when she and I were having our live chat about my book, her questions to me were like, is this real for you? Like, was this really your experience? That, oh, somebody got divorced and they were shamed, or like they were, shamed for having boyfriends, or they were treated like this. And I was like, yes, has that not been your experience? And she said, no. And it made my heart swell with happiness. I was like, oh my goodness, that is so wonderful to hear. And I do think that the generations' mindsets are evolving. I think there are more inter or biracial marriages happening, right? It's becoming more integrated, and I think it's becoming more common. And look at us, we're talking about it. So, which wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. So I do think that it's changing.
So I'm a facilitator for this nonprofit. We do Ask Auntie sessions. So I'm Radha Auntie, and I meet with teenagers a couple times a year, just like to help them talk about whatever anxiety and pressures. Obviously, dating and relationships always comes up, and I am so surprised to see that. So I live in Dallas, Texas. For those of you who know, if you think Edison and New Jersey is little India,
No,
it's little South India. Okay, so
I
it's
know.
really exciting to me, and I'm in my mid 40s, so like my kids are now in high school and stuff, and all of these kids are dating. Their parents know that they're dating. Their parents are like not necessarily okay with it, but like they're very much aware. They're not sneaking around. They're also dating other Indians, non-Indians. So not only are the generational mindsets shifting, I think the culture from India, because they all came over here 15, 20 years ago, not like our parents. And so that culture in India is also evolving. Yeah, Lavanya, please go ahead.
Yeah. So rather, the statistic that I wanted to highlight is that I read something, I think it's the Pew Research Center, which is a credible research. I think they did some survey on just Indians and also other Asian groups. It came out in May 2025. And I think they said that out of the 5 million Indians that we have right now in the US or Indian origin, about 90% are monoracial, 9 to 10%, which I was shocked at how high the number was. 9 to 10% are Indian and something else. And I thought that was,
Interesting.
so yeah, it's a very reliable organization. So, but I was like, wow, 10%. And it's only going to get higher with each successive generation.
Yeah.
And I love your comment, Dallaspuram, your Telugu, right? Yeah, it is literally Dallaspuram down here. And I love it. I love every minute of it. But Bhaktavar, you're welcome to get on if you want, or others I'll read your comment. But she's saying, bouncing off of Anjali's comment, I've always wondered about how people fill, for the lack of a better word, the void that may exist in a sense of shared love, food, space, spice tolerance, jokes and references to films you watch as a Desi person growing up in South Asia, or vice versa, growing up here, more into Hollywood or Bollywood. So is there some sort of checklist items that mean more to some people and less to others? She personally sees a lot of sternness in herself and is wondering if she's significantly reducing her super small queer dating pool as it is. Great
Yeah,
question.
so this is really interesting. So many of you do not know me. My cousin knows me. I'm as Bollywood as it gets. Okay, I listen to classic Bollywood, like our parents' generation, our generation. I watch every Bollywood movie. Like I did Bhangra dancing, I do Bollywood dancing. Like I am constantly quoting from every Karan Johar movie possible. So this was a huge concern of mine, right? I also love Desi food. I love so many things about the Indian culture. And for the longest time, I thought that was something I needed to share with my partner. And if I couldn't share that with my partner, they couldn't truly understand me. And like I said, I had that, I tried that, right? And I realized through that there are so many things that are more important. And as long as like those are my hobbies, right? Those things are for me. They make me happy. And what I truly need in a partner is someone who is open who respects that, who encourages that, who wants to see me happy, right? And makes it happen for me. So even if my husband doesn't understand the references, the fact that he'll sit down and watch Bollywood movies with me. He doesn't care if I spend an entire 6-hour car ride listening to Bollywood tracks. You know, he has my first Hindi words books and flashcards around the house. He's really made an effort to embrace the culture and to learn about the culture. And you know, and what more could I ask for, right? And for that other piece of me, you know, that's for me. I love getting cozied up in a blanket and watching a Bollywood movie, and I don't want to be bothered. I have plenty of girlfriends, right? They always say it takes a village, right, to keep all of your cups full. So I feel like as long as you have other outlets in your life where you can fill that cup, you're okay. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to go away. It's just something that maybe that's not something you share with that person. Maybe it's something you share with a friend or a family member. And as long as you still get to have it and they're supportive, then I think you'll be okay. In terms of a checklist about what means more, you know, I think I think you definitely, you know, it was important to me that I could still eat Indian food on a regular basis, right? And reality, you know, my husband eats Indian food with me now twice a week. If I feel like eating it 4 times and he doesn't, then we don't eat the same thing, right? As long as there's mutual respect and understanding and encouragement about what the other person wants, that to me is love, right? But that's my definition. I see another question.
For Pride Month, I reviewed a movie called Good Indian Boy, if you guys have seen it, with Karan Soni and Zarna Garg. And so he's a queer Indian boy and man, I keep saying boy, and he falls in love with the white guy, but ironically, they meet at a temple. This white guy loves DDLJ. He eats spicier food than Karan is like portrayed as a coconut in the movie. So if anybody's seen it, like I really highly encourage you to see it. Like it shows how this white guy and Indian guy, like their roles were reversed and they fit together so nicely and had a big fat Indian wedding, right? So it just speaks to what you said, Bhavna, that everybody has their own level of Indianness, gives them comfort, and it doesn't always have to come from your partner filling your cup.
Right. Right. And you know, my husband has those things, right? Like I think on the same topic, you know, a lot of people think that they have to share so many things in common with their partner in order to be compatible, right? I love Bollywood movies. My husband loves soccer. I don't like soccer. Does that mean we don't belong together? No. I encourage him to watch soccer and he encourages me to watch Bollywood movies and we get to be very happy together. And those are very, you know, I would say superficial examples, right? But that doesn't define compatibility. What defines compatibility is, do you, you know, want each other and love each other the same? Are you as invested in each other? And that shows in all these different aspects.
Speaking of
And
similar,
yes, I do find that Indians and Italians are very similar in terms of family values, like always putting family first, always being willing to do things for their family, wanting to take care of their parents. I got really food. Oh my God, so much food, always eating, overeating, always offering food, taking food to people, you know, bringing food, getting food from people. Like it's a love language in both of our cultures and extremely loud conversations.
Yeah.
Our family gatherings are out of control, overstimulating, but they're so fun.
Let's talk a little bit about the writing process. Pavna, this is your first book. I hope to have more and just learn more from your perspective. But as a debut author, what was the most rewarding part of writing this book and maybe the most difficult part of writing a novel?
Sure. So I would say the most rewarding part of this has been how it's been received, right? When you are writing a novel for the first time, you have no idea, like you think it's good, your publisher thinks it's good, but you really have no idea how it's going to be received. I was concerned that some people might see it as controversial, right? Even though it's not intended to be, it's intended to approach some very serious topics in a light way. And at its core, it is a romance story and story about, you know, deep friendships with your girlfriends. But I would say I was a little concerned about that, but that was super rewarding to me. So far, this book has been very well received, and relatable by South Asians, non-South Asians, people that have, traditional families, or they grew up in strict households, or just the battle of the generations. Every generation is different from the generation before. So it's been very well received from different cultures and from different age groups, and I really, really, I'm so happy about that. I would say the most difficult part of writing the novel was, so I don't want to spoil the book for anyone that hasn't read it, but I think what happens in a lot of these stories is that people end up blaming the parents, right? The parents become the blame for the trauma that's passed on, and that's the story that I keep seeing over and over again. And I didn't want that to happen in my book, right? This is not a story about blaming your parents. It's about trying to bridge the gap and build understanding. And I wanted to make sure that there was that happy ending. I think there's a lot of stories, especially in Bollywood, that are like, they're catastrophes, right? Like women are disowned and they never speak to their family again. And, I wanted to show a version of this where open communication leads to deeper understanding. Maybe not a perfect understanding. Maybe you don't bring them over to your side, but you build an understanding. And that was hard to capture
Yeah.
without creating any blame. So I hope I did that. That's what I found to be the most difficult.
Yeah. You did a good job with blending humor, romance, culture. Was there any steps that you had to take in the writing process to make sure it didn't get heavy or negative, or like I just rom-com is such a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, I didn't do anything specifically. That was just, I guess that's just my writing style. A
Okay.
lot of it is my personality,
Yeah.
right? Like I said, I wanted to approach some pretty difficult topics while still keeping it light and making it feel like a nice rom-com read, but still make you think. Is this the way that it should be? Should we think like this? Should I think about this differently? Without getting too heavy or casting blame or feeling like I'm attacking any, generation.
As a cheerleader of second generational South Asian culture in general, that's literally my passion. I'm so excited to hear that I in Indian has gotten such good, reception. You've been getting such good feedback. Obviously, you didn't write this book just for Desi people or for South Asian. So what are you hoping readers from outside the South Asian community are learning or walking away with?
Absolutely. I hope that they learn a little bit about our culture. There's a lot of us in this country, and like I said, the first, second, and third generation experiences are very unique. And help them to have a lot of the background that might help them communicate better, understand our cultural and communication dynamics a bit better. I also think that this book resonates with a lot of non-South Asians from a romantic standpoint, other interracial couples, all women really that are interested in dating and struggling with self-acceptance. And I think that this book applies to them as well, and I hope that they get the same thing out of it that a second generation South Asian might.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have
One more thing. I also hope that this makes people reprioritize, rethink how they define love, family, acceptance, and reprioritize what's important to them in a partner. I hope it gives them the confidence to live their truth and realize that whatever that truth is, does not take away from them being Indian, even 1%. And that it can mean whatever you want it to mean.
That's beautiful. Yeah. That's probably where you're going to go with this last question. But before we get there, I want to invite the audience. I have a quick, just a fun little exercise. If you guys want to share, you can either put it in the chat or come on mic on camera. But I want to talk a little bit about maybe what's one cultural rule about dating or marriage that you've had to face, you've heard from your parents, or like you've seen in Bollywood. And what's something like maybe that rule that could be tweaked or refined or just thrown away with altogether when it comes to your personal life? I'll go with mine first. So I grew up in America, but very similar time period as you, Bhavna, and it was like such a big thing. My parents, like, I hate to say this, and they thought it was funny, but there was like this quote, no BMWs. I don't know if anybody else has heard that term before, but
Yes, yeah.
yeah. And that's what they would try. And they thought it was so clever and so funny. Like basically it was saying, don't bring home anybody that was black, white, or Muslim, which is what that meant by BMW. Um, I've dated all of the above, right? Like I didn't bring any of them home, but it didn't serve its purpose when they were like, oh my God, don't, because I think that one, I'm a rule breaker or whatever. I just want to experience life for myself. But I'm so glad that that stigma is not there anymore, or hopefully just going away the more and more that we evolve as a community.
Yeah, and if you guys have read the book, I mean, you'll see Leo calls Arya and her family out about that. And he uses a very strong word, you know, rhymes with no, he says that it's racist. And that was a bold choice on my part to put that out there. And there's Arya looking at this white guy saying, are you seriously calling me racist? And then she thinks about it and realizes, like, oh man, that is kind of racist, right? Not only interracial racism, but a lot of South Asians have racism even within the different types of Indian,
Uh-huh.
right? So it's not just, you know, Indians and other cultures. It's Gujaratis and Punjabis. It's, you know, North Indian and South Indian. Like it's even within the culture, there is even more pressure to stay within your subculture. So, you know, the book definitely tries to tackle that.
Yeah. Anjali said a rule or norm she's heard is that you should be able to meet somebody and make a decision quickly. Don't date around for months. What do you think about that?
Sorry, it just meet someone quickly and make decisions quickly. Don't date for months.
But that's a rule she probably heard from her parents. I know I heard it too, right? Like if you talk, my mom always says about like my baby cousins, like she's been with him for over a year. I don't know what they're waiting for, things like that.
Yeah. Or like, you know, oh, okay, now you're dating, like just, you know, hurry up and or get married. What is there to think about? And then maybe there's like people swing to the other side of that pendulum entirely, and then they end up waiting too long. Like, I don't know what the right time is. You know, I think there's so many factors, meeting the right person at the right time, and you both have to be equally ready at the same time. And if it clicks, then that's your person. And you know, and if you don't want the same things, then it's not your person.
Yeah.
Right? But how long does that take? I don't know. I mean, I knew on my second date. But is that too fast? Who's to say? I mean, my husband and I, we moved in together after 4 months, and that was like a huge, like, what do you mean you're moving in together? Right? But luckily I was divorced and nobody asked me questions. Like that's the one thing that you earn when you get divorced, is that like people are too afraid to say anything to you because they're just like, oh my God.
She's already making bad choices. Let her keep.
Yeah, she's like, we're not even surprised.
Awesome. Well, if anybody has any more rules that they've heard or dealt with, please do drop them in the chat. Samar said, Bhavna of earlier, well said of you, Bhavna, earlier being a Northeast Indian versus North Indian versus South. I always hear of discrimination amongst Indians in urban cities in India, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my last question for you, and please keep the comments flowing, folks. We have Bhavna for another half an hour. I'll take advantage. But my last big question for you is, you know, what message do you hope that the readers walk away with about identity, love, being your own
Oh,
person?
you already answered this question.
Okay.
I hope that they walk away, like I said, with the confidence to live their truth, right? Realizing that being Indian is just something you are. It's not something you have to do. It's not something you have to prove. Nobody is a better Indian than somebody else because they do this more or that more, and you're not a worse Indian because you do this less or that less. You know, being Indian is, we're redefining being Indian as this is just something that we are. And that can mean whatever I want. It can mean divorce. It can mean not divorce. It can mean marrying in the culture, outside of the culture. You know, it can mean going to the mandir, not going to the mandir. Like being Indian is whatever it means to you. And that can mean holding on to certain parts of the culture and letting go of other parts of the culture. That doesn't make you less Indian. And that's really why I named it the I in Indian, you know, because I really want people to capture, reflect, and embrace their inner I, their inner Indian, and let that flow. And I think that that helps people find their partner.
Lavanya asked, how are you exposing your son to his Indian or Desi side?
Oh, okay. Well, my son's name is Ram. So every morning we watch Ranveer sing on the big screen, singing different like Ram Leela songs, and I sing Hindi songs to him. He has a couple of books that are in English, but they're like Hindi words, so we read those. My parents only talk to him in Hindi. We're hoping to take him on a trip to India in the next, year or two when he's old enough for us to travel. And it's not a total disaster on an airplane for 16 hours. But he loves Indian food. We cook Indian food, and I want him to grow up not really knowing the difference. Like it's just a part of who he is.
Love it. Actually reminded me of something too. There was a movie, Madhuri Dixit movie, that came out in the past 5 or 7 years. She's in India. She's a dance teacher because she's
Acha
obviously
Nachle. Mm-hmm.
yes, 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 yes. And the groom's family or whatever is from America, and they look down at her because she's a dance teacher. And in my mind, I'm like, there are 1.4 billion people in that country. They are not all doctors, lawyers, and engineers, right? It takes
Right.
so many people for society to function. We just have this substratum that have emigrated to this country out of privilege, out of opportunity, things like that. Why do we feel pigeonholed like prioritize or fit ourselves into that version of being Indian?
Yeah. I think part of that is like there's this really big notion of social comparison in the culture, right? Is that like they see what peers are doing and the peers' kids are doing, and if they're doing that, then you should be doing that because you need to somehow keep up because everybody came to this country and we need to maximize the opportunity and work harder and make more money and make the most of this opportunity that's been given. And I think that that social comparison ends up getting the best of a lot of people.
Yeah. I put in another discussion question if anybody would like to chime in. Reflect on a time when you felt caught between two worlds. How did it shape your view of love or identity? I'll share a personal story of mine. So, my kids, Indian, whatever, but I was born and raised here. My husband was born and raised here. We speak English primarily. I do not read or write. So, for me, like it was just very basic communication. I'm hungry, I'm tired, whatever, right? I don't have a full grasp of the language. I love Bollywood, but I read subtitles, right? And so now, something we didn't really touch on is religion. We talked so much about culture tonight, but we didn't talk about religion. My parents were very secular. They come from quote unquote an educated family. They weren't very religious. They didn't teach us religion. So now I wanted to make sure my kids were exposed to it, at least in a way, because I wasn't going to be able to teach it to them. So we go to a weekly Balvihar class on Sunday mornings. Where I get caught between two different worlds is if anybody knows me, Radha likes to party. Okay. So Saturday nights, I'm usually out and about doing my thing. I go to Bollywood, like I do love my culture and all that. But then Sunday morning, it's a struggle. And it's like, I know that if I don't prioritize going to cultural classes, religious classes, then my kids aren't going to get the exposure. Then what was the point of me doing this anyway? So that is an internal struggle I face probably 3 times a month.
You know, the problem there is the time. It's just the timing of the session on Sunday morning.
All right, I guess if there's no other questions, Bhavna, just, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your story, Arya's story, Leo's story. It was really meaningful. And I think that all of us, and if you haven't read the book, as I mentioned, I'll send out a follow-up email with a link to tonight's recording and a code for you to get a discount. But I think anybody who reads it, it's a fun read, and you're really going to identify with some part of the story or character, regardless if you grew up here, or if you grew up India, or a blend of both. So thank you so much. Anything final you want to share with this? Is there, like, what's coming next? How can we support you in your author journey?
Yeah, I would, this is my first novel, but it is the first of 3. So there are 2 other characters in the book, and each one of those girls is going to have her own book, which tackles some other cultural or South Asian, type of identity and love related issues. So those will be coming soon. The next book's scheduled to drop Memorial Day of 2026. So you can keep that on the radar. And I would love if anybody has read the book, your early encouragement could really change this book's journey and get it in front of more people. So I would appreciate a like, a follow, and a review if you enjoyed the book.
On Goodreads?
Goodreads or Amazon, either one.
Okay, awesome.
And I can
Definitely.
send those links to you so you can share it with the group.
100%. Yeah, folks, please do leave an encouraging review, and let's make sure that Bhavna's next 2 books get out there just as big as this one, if not bigger. And then for us at Single to Shadi, the Mindful Dating Book Club, we're always open for recommendations. We met Bhavna through one of our friends. So please, if you know of any stories, it doesn't have to be romance related. We just want some sort of South Asian component. We've even done like nonfiction books. We've had in America, a white Caucasian author who wrote a paper, right? So anything that you feel would be a good discussion topic, we would love to bring it to our audience. Please do send us your recommendations. And again, same as Bhavna, please like and follow. Please subscribe to our newsletter so you can find out about more of our events and what we do. Thank you all so much, Bhavna. Thank you again so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.